There was a moment in history when humanity truly believed the sky was not the limit. Airports felt like gateways to the future, jet engines sounded like progress itself, and speed became the ultimate symbol of power, prestige, and ambition. In that era, one aircraft stood above all others, the Concorde. It didn't just fly faster than sound. It flew faster than imagination. Crossing oceans in mere hours, it redefined what air travel could be. And because of it, the world asked a dangerous question. What comes next? The success of the Concorde ignited a global race unlike anything aviation had ever seen. Governments, engineers, and aerospace giants all shared the same dream: to build something faster, bigger, more powerful. Something that wouldn't just rival the Concorde, but replace it. What followed was a secretive, high-stakes battle fought in design rooms, wind tunnels, and classified military bases. Most people never saw these aircraft. Some never even left the drawing board. Others flew and vanished into history. This is not just a story about airplanes. It's a story about ambition pushed too far, about visions ahead of their time, and about machines that almost changed the world forever. At the center of this story stands the Concorde itself, the benchmark no one could escape. Sleek, elegant, and brutally fast, it was more than a passenger jet. It was a political statement, a technological miracle, and a symbol of human confidence. Flying at over twice the speed of sound, the Concorde shrank the planet. Breakfast in London, lunch in New York. Time zones became irrelevant. Distance lost its meaning. But behind the glamour, cracks were already forming. The Concorde was expensive to operate, restricted by sonic booms, and limited in capacity. While passengers marveled at champagne above the clouds, engineers around the world were already working on what they believed would be its successor. And some of those designs were nothing short of extraordinary. One of the most ambitious challengers came from across the Atlantic. In the United States, Boeing set out to build something even more radical. Their proposal wasn't just faster. It was larger, louder, and more daring than anything ever imagined. The Boeing 2707 promised Mach 3 speeds, variable sweep wings, and the ability to carry hundreds of passengers across continents at unimaginable velocity. It was meant to be America's answer to the Concorde, and then some. But ambition has a price. As designs grew more complex, costs spiraled out of control. Environmental concerns rose. Political support faded. And before the 2707 could ever take flight, the program was canceled, leaving behind full-scale mock-ups and a haunting question. What if? Meanwhile, behind the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union refused to be left behind. Their response came in the form of the Tu-144, an aircraft that looked eerily similar to the Concorde, yet followed a very different path. Nicknamed the Concorde Ski, it actually flew before its Western rival. On paper, it matched the Concorde in speed. In reality, it struggled with reliability, safety, and public trust. The story is one of pressure and pride. Determined to prove technological dominance, the Soviets rushed development. The result was a jet that dazzled the world briefly, only to fade after tragic accidents and operational failures. What could have been a triumph became a warning. Speed alone was not enough. And these were only the beginning. Across Europe, North America, and Asia, aerospace companies sketched visions of the future. Some designs blended military technology with civilian travel. Others aimed to silence the sonic boom itself. There were aircraft built almost entirely from titanium, jets designed to skim the edge of space, and concepts so advanced they still feel futuristic today. Most people have never heard their names. They were classified, canceled, or quietly forgotten. But each one represented a moment when humanity stood on the edge of a new era and stepped back. As we explore these forgotten supersonic jets, remember this: failure does not mean insignificance. Sometimes the most important aircraft are the ones that never made it. Because within their designs lie the dreams, mistakes, and lessons that continue to shape aviation today. And as you'll soon see, some of these machines were closer to replacing the Concorde than anyone ever realized. As the dream of commercial supersonic travel expanded, some of the boldest ideas didn't even come from passenger aviation. They emerged from the military world, where speed had always been a weapon. Engineers began asking a dangerous question. What if the future of civilian flight borrowed its DNA from aircraft built for war? One of the most astonishing answers to that question was the North American XB-70 Valkyrie. Designed to cruise at Mach 3, this aircraft was never meant to carry passengers. But it proved something extraordinary. It showed the world that sustained, controlled flight at extreme speeds was possible. Its futuristic design, towering vertical stabilizers, and white heat-resistant skin made it look like it came from another era. For many engineers, the XB-70 wasn't just a bomber, it was a glimpse of what civilian supersonic travel could become. Inspired by such breakthroughs, designers began pushing boundaries even further. In Canada, one aircraft nearly changed the balance of global aviation before disappearing entirely. The Avro Aero was years ahead of its time, fast, agile, and technologically superior. Although developed as a fighter, its advanced aerodynamics influenced countless supersonic concepts that followed. And then suddenly it was gone, scrapped, erased, and surrounded by mystery. To this day, its cancellation remains one of the most controversial moments in aviation history. Back in the United States, Douglas Aircraft quietly developed its own vision of a supersonic transport. The Douglas 2229 was sleek, refined, and built with efficiency in mind. Unlike some of its rivals, it focused on practicality rather than sheer spectacle. But practicality wasn't enough in a world driven by politics and prestige. Without sufficient funding and public support, the project faded into obscurity, remembered only by aviation historians and archived blueprints. Across the Atlantic, France was already deeply invested in supersonic ambition. Before the Concorde ever took its final shape, engineers explored the supercaravelle, a concept that laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the iconic aircraft we know today. It was a reminder that even legendary machines are born from trial, error, and countless abandoned ideas. In the Soviet Union, ambition reached almost mythical levels with the Sukhoi T-4, known as Satka. Built primarily from titanium and designed to cruise at extreme speeds, it looked more like a spacecraft than an airplane. Its cost, complexity, and political challenges ultimately doomed it, but its technology influenced generations of high-speed aircraft design. The T-4 proved that innovation often comes at the edge of what is financially and politically possible. As decades passed, the world changed. Environmental concerns grew louder. Fuel costs soared. The sonic boom, once a symbol of power, became an obstacle. Supersonic travel was no longer just a technical challenge, but a social one. Still, the dream refused to die. In the modern era, companies like Ariane attempted to resurrect the vision. The Ariane AS-2 promised quieter supersonic flight, advanced aerodynamics, and a return to speed without the mistakes of the past. For a moment, it felt like history was about to repeat itself. But reality struck again. Funding collapsed, timelines stretched, and once more, the dream slipped away. Today, these aircraft exist mostly in archives, museums, and forgotten footage. They are rarely spoken of, yet their influence is everywhere. Every modern airliner carries lessons learned from these failures. Every new concept of supersonic travel stands on the shoulders of these forgotten giants. The Concorde may have been the only one to truly succeed, but it was never alone. It was part of a much larger story, a story of daring ideas, incredible risks, and humanity's relentless desire to outrun time itself. And perhaps that's the greatest legacy of these forgotten supersonic jets. Not that they failed, but that they dared to imagine a future faster than sound. Even today, decades after the peak of the supersonic era, the fascination has never truly disappeared. Engineers still study these forgotten jets, not as failures, but as blueprints of what humanity once dared to attempt. Each canceled project, each prototype that never entered service, left behind knowledge that continues to shape aviation in subtle but powerful ways. What many people don't realize is that modern aircraft owe a great deal to these abandoned dreams. Advances in materials, aerodynamics, noise reduction, and fuel efficiency were born from the same experiments that once aimed to break the sound barrier. The lessons learned from supersonic transports influenced everything from wing design to cockpit systems. In many ways, today's safe, efficient airliners exist because these daring projects push technology to its limits first. Yet there is something deeply emotional about these aircraft. They represent a time when aviation was driven not just by profit, but by vision. Governments were willing to invest billions. Engineers were encouraged to think beyond constraints. The public believed that the future would always be faster, higher, and more extraordinary than the present. Airports felt like places of wonder, not just transit hubs. But the world changed. Economics became ruthless. Environmental responsibility became unavoidable. Speed, once celebrated, became controversial. The sonic boom that thrilled crowds also shattered windows and disturbed cities. Supersonic travel, once a promise of progress, became a symbol of excess in an increasingly cautious world. And so, one by one, these jets disappeared. Some were dismantled. Others were locked away in hangars, never to fly again. A few survived in museums, frozen in time, silent reminders of a future that almost was. Still, the dream refuses to die. Today, new generations of engineers are quietly revisiting the same questions. Can supersonic flight return without the noise? Without the environmental cost? Without repeating the mistakes of the past? Projects backed by NASA and private companies hint that a new chapter may one day begin. Quieter, cleaner, and smarter. If that day comes, it will not be the beginning of the story. It will be a continuation. Because long before modern technology made it possible, these forgotten supersonic jets already imagined it. They tested the boundaries of physics. They challenged political realities. And they proved that humanity is always willing to chase the impossible, even when success is uncertain. The Concorde may have been the icon, the one that reached the sky and stayed there. But behind it stood an entire generation of aircraft that dared to compete, dared to innovate, and dared to fail. And in doing so, they shaped aviation forever. So the next time you see a plane streak across the sky, remember this: the future of flight is built not only on triumphs, but on forgotten dreams that flew too close to tomorrow. These aircraft were never just machines made of metal and fuel. They were symbols of an era when the future felt limitless, when speed meant progress, and when the sky itself seemed ready to be conquered. Though most of these supersonic jets never carried passengers or entered regular service, their legacy still echoes through every runway, every control tower, and every new aircraft design. They remind us that innovation is born from bold ideas, and that even the dreams that fail can move humanity forward.